Bills Mafia, what is going on? It is a brand new week of Bills training camp, and we are back. Mr. Ryan Talbot and Matt Parrino, Shout Football Podcast. We are back for our observations from today out at practice in Orchard Park. Ryan, my friend, how are you? I was cooking today. Another one. It's funny, like we've had a pretty mild summer. Like I haven't remembered a lot of days that have just absolutely, kicked my butt. But I will say the last 2 days out at practice, it's like, and there's nowhere to find shade. So I'm just out there. And I told you I was a little bit late with my observations because I had to get some lunch because I was feeling a little faint. I felt so soft, but it's hot out there.
Oh, absolutely. Doing well here, but you're right. I was outside shooting hoops with my son, and I said the same thing. I said, I don't know if it's these really cool mornings that are like luring me in and making me think we're getting closer to fall, but then like today the heat hits you, and it's like summer's still here for a little bit longer. So I can definitely relate to the effect of the heat today for sure.
So, like I mentioned, this is the official podcast of Syracuse.com, New York Upstate, for all your Buffalo Bills coverage, analysis, content. And we're on all the podcast platforms. So if you guys could give us a subscription over there, rating and review wherever you get your podcast. If you listen to this in audio form, Elliot or Andy, I should say, asking about Stefon Diggs, we will definitely get to that. We're going to talk about a lot of things from camp today, but I will pose the question to you, Ryan. What's on your mind? What would you like to talk about first here today?
I know the big topic's Josh Allen, but I want to talk about the leadership of Stefon Diggs because we saw some clips today. One where Diggs was talking with Allen, and then Allen delivering a throw to him where after he catches it, like immediately before he even finishes running his route, he points to Allen and says something encouraging. We saw him talking with Isaiah Hodgins and Hodgins doing some push-ups. So can you talk a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of Stefon Diggs taking on a leadership role here with the Bills?
Yeah, and I think this is something that's been brewing, and it's so funny because we go back to some of the off-season workout interviews that have popped up, after the offensive group met down in Florida, and people talking about, his teammates about how Stefon Diggs just shows up to the field to work, and I think that is something that kind of rubs off on other guys. So you mentioned today, seeing him out on the practice field, doing a little bit of his leadership, the way that he leads, and the way that is like just by going out there, being who he is as a player, but also just the open line of communication. That's been something that I've picked up on all summer. And then we heard from Josh Allen today after practice say one of the cool things about him, and he gave us a little nugget about like how, he was able to get on a really build a good relationship with Cole Beasley and John Brown last year. It came down to spending hours in the film room, spending hours in just communicating with each other. What do you like here? What do you like there? And already he says that Stefon Diggs and himself have really gotten on the same page, and there's so much room to grow because they're just kind of, getting used to being around each other again. Josh Allen was on the Eric Wood podcast. I would definitely recommend going and giving that a listen. Shout out to Eric, who's always been so gracious with us. Go back and listen to his episode on our show. He was really great earlier in the summer. But it was a really good episode and conversation. And one of the things he said is that it's just great to be around the guys again. You spend this whole summer where you're all kind of away from each other, and not really able to just do something simple like go out to dinner and just, get to know your teammates. And you see that that's starting to happen now. So I think that might be playing a role in, Stefon Diggs getting comfortable, and a lot of the things that you're starting to see out there now, you mentioned, I think are a result of that comfort.
Oh, absolutely. And then in the comments, they said, what happened to Diggs? And I think they're talking about that little scare that we had today. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Well, I think it caught most people off or by surprise because, for me, I was kind of at the other end of the field and the play happened in the left. The ball went to the left part of the end zone. I can't even remember now who was the intended target because all eyes shifted to Stefon Diggs, who was down on the ground on the other side of the field in the opposite side of the end zone. And it was Levi Wallace that was kind of looming over him, checking on him. And you saw the training staff immediately run out to him. It looks like they were, you hate to ever kind of speculate on an injury like in training camp, but it looked like they were working out his one leg. I was again at the opposite side, so it was tough to see. Cole Beasley made his way down there, and he was down for a good minute, Ryan, where they were working on it. So as those seconds pass by, you're kind of sitting there like, man, how serious could this be? Especially, a couple days removed from seeing Josh Norman suffer an injury. He left the game. You start thinking about hamstring issues and soft tissue injuries, which we've talked about over and over again, is one of the fears that a lot of teams had that guys were going to experience. I'm not sure what the injury was, but Lamar Jackson was just kept out of a practice recently. He returned today. But any given day you could lose a star, and it's more prone to it right now. But he pops back up, walks it off on the sideline. He looked uncomfortable, went down there. The last thing I noticed before the next play was him kneeling on the sideline. And then I looked back like a play or two later, and there's Stefon Diggs catching a ball, running a stop route, testing the leg, and he practiced the rest of the way. So, honestly, it would have been a blip in the radar if we were live tweeting during practice, I think. But it was something that we couldn't really get out there until after the practice was over. And I'm sure Bills fans were probably like, reading a lot of what we were tweeting, we're like, wait a second, what happened to Stefon Diggs? Oh, okay. He was okay. So, yeah, definitely a scary moment, though.
Oh, without a doubt, because, if anything were to happen to Diggs, you're kind of right back to square one offensively, where you were 1 year ago. Yeah, you'd still have the rookies here that they drafted both in the running back room and at the wide receiver position.
I'd like to interrupt you there, though. I don't know necessarily if they'd be back to square one because Mr. Gabriel Davis continues the ball. Now, listen, this is practice, man. We're talking about practice, right? Allen Iverson, the historic quote, what can you really tell from practice? And, we've seen in years past, you've talked about it many of times covering this team a few years. Brandon Riley is somebody a couple of years ago who pops as somebody that is so great in the preseason and training camp, but who never really materializes. So you don't want to take too much from what we're seeing right now. But, dude, Gabriel Davis is just winning over and over again. Contested catches. There was one play today. They were doing some one-on-one drills, and you know how those are. It always is kind of advantageous for the receiver. Stefon Diggs beat Tre'Davious White on one where he kind of shook him a little bit, got downfield, got open, and I think Tre'Davious White was biting on the first move and trying to guess. But that's neither here nor there. There was one play later in the drill where Gabe Davis was going one-on-one with Tre'Davious White. He kind of got a step on him downfield. The ball was put out there where only he can grab it. He makes the catch, and of course, as Tre'Davious White, the experienced corner that he is, tries to get his hand in there and rip it out, and they go to the ground fighting for it, and Tre'Davious White could not get that ball away from him. He made a couple plays on the touchdown drive, which finished with an Andre Roberts just absolute beaut, which we'll talk about in a little while. But Gabriel Davis, this dude is he looks completely comfortable. He can do so many different things. I wish I could tell you about all the places, all the things that he's doing, but I can't. I can't get too much into the weeds there. But I will just say he's making an impact. And I think that I've left the first 7 practices. Now, this was their 7th padded practice. I've left each day since he returned from injury more impressed than the day before and what I saw from him.
And that is encouraging. I shouldn't have said back at square one, but Diggs being the centerpiece of this offense. But you're right. That is encouraging. Real quick, we just got some news from the Bills. Bills placed cornerback Ike Brown on the reserve/retired list. So that one kind of came out of nowhere in terms of that news. But the Bills just sent that out to us. So I thought I'd get that in there. Live news coming
Very
through
interesting.
Here.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I can't remember if I saw him out there today. 38. I'm trying to think back. I mean, obviously we were. It's tough when you're trying to pay attention to a lot of things going on there. But no, I didn't see him out there, so that's interesting. It's tough. Who knows? And in this environment, you never know. What types of things are impacting guys' decisions on these type of matters. But it'll be interesting as we learn more.
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, one return that we had today, and it wasn't due to injury or anything else, was the return of Josh Allen after the false positive. How did he look today out on the field in his return?
He was good, and it's tough because there wasn't a lot of splash plays today. It's not something where you're going to go out there and watch practice and see, him firing it downfield to John Brown and Stefon Diggs left and right and just beating the secondary. First of all, they're going up against the Bills secondary. So, you got to take that into account. But just very measured. I thought that a lot of what they were running today got Cole Beasley and Isaiah McKenzie involved. Isaiah McKenzie continues to look really just powerful. But just, after we talked to Josh Allen for a bit today, and he said one of the things he said about the whole debacle from over the weekend with all the false positive tests and being forced to sit out practice yesterday is he made a good point. It's a day worth of reps that he lost, and so he has to make up for that. And I think that he did a good job today. I'm not going to sit here and say that he was great, but I thought he was solid. I thought that he made some really good throws in some tight windows, and executed in that short game where I think that if you're a Bills fan, that's where you want him to still continue to improve and grow. Again, not a lot of downfield stuff, but again, situational football. They were working a lot of different things. Can't get into the weeds there, but I thought that he was good today. He got a bunch of people involved. Dawson Knox had a nice catch. I think that I just charted two I would place in the category of bad throws from Josh today. But overall, solid.
And I think I would take that right now. I mean, you want to see some splashy plays from this offense when the regular season gets here. But I think I would actually, myself personally, prefer to see him be able to just move up and down the field, getting little chunks of yards here and there, 7, 12, 15 yards. Rather than having to depend on that 40-yard, 50-yard splash play, I'd like to see him be able to sustain drives. So I actually kind of like that we're hearing that he was able to kind of put some little things together in that short intermediate game. So I think that's encouraging. One big topic of conversation today that we heard from a lot of the players and as well as Sean McDermott is the talk about certain stadiums having fans in the crowd versus others not. Sean McDermott was very blunt about it. He came out and he did not like that. And some of the players even spoke on it. So, what did you get from the players and the coaches today in terms of their feelings about the fact that they're going to enter some stadiums this year where there's going to be 10, 20,000 fans maybe, and others where, especially at home, where they're not going to be able to have the support of the Bills Mafia?
Yeah, I think it comes down to competitive equity, and this is something that we talked about going back to the beginning of training camp, when teams were starting to schedule things out, making sure that nobody's going to get a head start on things. And there was some concern there, and it seemed like they were able to execute the opening of training camps across the league pretty seamlessly in that department. So, we got a chance to talk to Micah Hyde today, and he was, basically saying that I want to see the NFL come together and figure out a plan so everybody is on the same page and maybe can institute a policy where, if Miami's going to get to have 13,000 fans, then Buffalo can have 13,000 fans. Now, it's going to be tough to navigate those waters because you're going to have to deal with state and city municipalities where you're going to have to come to terms with what's allowed in certain places. Like right now, I was talking to a few people today, and I'm looking at that Miami road opener for the Bills, and they were at the apex. We talked about it on a couple podcasts of, the epicenter, I think was the quote from an expert of the pandemic. And at the height of things, they were dealing with some days as high as 10,000 new cases. I think the most was like, I can't remember what the most was, but I was looking back a month ago and it was like 10,000 cases a day. They're down to about 3,000 cases a day, but that's still quite a bit. I mean, they're still dealing with the pandemic in a much different way than Western New York and New York State is, in general. So I think that coming to terms with what you want to do as a league, we talked about it with, what they dealt with over the last 3 days, just, putting together a plan if in case we have to deal with this, because we could reach the opener and it still be a situation across the league where it doesn't make sense to have fans in the stands league wide. And I think the NFL has to come out and have some type of guidance for teams and cities.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And in the comments, some people saying, "Do you think we'll eventually have fans? Why is it that some places can have it, or why can't we have fans if our numbers are low? Is it a final decision?" I don't think it's a final decision necessarily. I think things could change as the season progresses here with the Bills itself. Possibly, I want to say that the door's open. But you're right. When you compare the numbers here in Western New York to that in Miami, it is a completely different ball game. So you'd think there'd be some wiggle room there, but that's obviously well above our pay grade in terms of figuring out whether or not fans will be in the stands. Elliot also, it's Tim Hortons cold brew. It's delicious. Highly recommend it. So no Dunkin' here, not a Dunkin' guy. But yeah, so I don't think at the end of the day, the NFL is quite sure where every team is going to be when it comes to fans between now and the end of the regular season or middle of the season. Is this going to be one of those things that you have to take on a week to week basis? But week 2, Miami having 13,000 fans, that could be a big competitive advantage for Miami. Now, and I don't want to knock the Dolphins fans too much, but it's not exactly loud there in Miami. I think the most recent years I've heard Bills fans over Miami. So we'll wait and see on that. Matt, going into the comments, because I know we like to drive it towards the people that are supporting us, who we greatly support. 2 players that have come up in names here: Mike Love and Christian Wade. Have you noticed either or anything from either player?
I didn't notice Christian Wade today, other than the fact that he wasn't on the practice field. He suffered a quad injury, which probably figures to really hurt him as he tries to make a bid to make this roster, as unlikely as I think that still is. And we've talked about this a little bit. But in terms, who was the other name?
Mike Love.
Mike Love. I've tried to watch for some of those guys. It's been really tough on these days when we're on the at the practice facility instead of the stadium, because we're just on that back line, and you got to really peer through a line of guys. So I haven't really noticed too much from Mike Love, but I think just without a chance of being able to ask Leslie about it, I think the fact that he's going through the drills, he looks healthy. He looks bigger. He looks to be completely recovered. So in that sense, I could give you that update. But in terms of how he's been playing, it's been tough. Another guy that I've seen pop up in the comments a few times has been Trey Adams. And I thought today was the first day where I really noticed him, and it was for probably not the reason you'd hope. And he just looked to be a little bit overmatched in the reps that I really zeroed in on him. Nobody in particular that going up against him where I thought was noteworthy, but just where he seemed to be a little bit sluggish, a step behind, just struggling to keep up with the speed, I think, of the game. And I wonder how much that may have impacted his drop in the draft, or not being drafted. I know that people thought, if healthy, he could have been even as high as a second round pick. I think I read it at some point before the injury. So not a great day for him today. And again, Trey Adams, a guy like that, and Mike Love, as good as he was in camp last year before the injury, they have real uphill battles to try to make this roster. Those 2 position groups are really good. The offensive line, just from the perspective of all of the years of experience. I mean, you look at a guy like Darrell Williams, and he's somebody I touted going into this thing. Like, I think people were sleeping on him a little bit. This is a guy that had the Bills don't sign guys unless they have a specific plan for them and how to utilize them. And I just think the high end ability that Darrell Williams flashed in 2017, and I know the injury is probably a bit of a concern in some of the tape that he put out there last year, but I think with the right plan, whatever that ends up being for Darrell Williams, he's looked solid. He's looked like a guy that, should compete for a starting spot. Where that ends up being, I don't know, but he's looked, whenever I've noticed him on the field, he's looked really good.
Yeah, and just really quick, going back to Mike Love, and I obviously don't have any intel on what the Bills are going to do with that 16-man practice squad, but he's one of those players where maybe no news is good news, because they liked him last year. They liked what they saw out of him. Maybe the fact that he's not flashing, he hasn't been the talk of training camp, could help them in terms of, if they're really interested in developing this guy, he could be one of those players that they can get onto the practice squad without having to worry about it, where Daryl Johnson, for instance, maybe he wouldn't be someone, because there's been a little more talk about him. He played a little bit more last year, obviously, as a rookie, so there's some film on him as well. So Mike Love, you're right, uphill battle to make this roster, but still a young guy in his career that they might be trying to develop and bring along slowly. One more defensive end question, then there's a lot of cornerback chatter here. Trent Murphy, someone said, how is he looking? Because there's been talk about, can the Bills justify keeping that contract on the books with that $175 million salary cap coming up in 2021?
He's been good, Ryan. He's been what you expect him to be. When he's out on the field, he looks like he knows what he's doing. He's made a couple plays today. He was rushing on a bit of a speed rush and got his hands up, deflected a ball down to the turf on a ball from Josh Allen. So he's been what he has been, and he shows up, and you know where he's playing and when he's playing. Again, I can't talk about,
Nice.
but I think that it's going to be a real tough call, and it's going to come down to, do you feel comfortable with those two young guys and Daryl Johnson and AJ Epinesa to fill the void that would be left by Trent Murphy? Because I still think he really figures into things. I'll be interested to see, like, I could pontificate more on the how they'll use all of the defensive ends once we get past the 53-man roster cut down. But I do think that there's so many different possibilities and so many different players that can make an impact to make up for Trent Murphy's loss. I still think it makes sense for the Bills to move on from a financial purpose, but I just think that he does so many things well. And I think that the institutional knowledge, when you do make the decision to cut him, it's going to be a tough one for them, because it's like, man, he spent 2 years and now into his third year in the system. He knows Leslie Frazier. Leslie Frazier knows, his strengths. And, but again, on the other flip side of that coin, Eric Washington, this is a whole new defensive line unit. And it seems to be, from everything we're hearing out of One Bills Drive, we heard it from Sean McDermott today, there's a real emphasis put on the pass rushing side of things by Eric Washington. So being that it's a new group, I could see that, maybe Trent Murphy moving on from him wouldn't be the hardest thing to deal with.
Yeah, he sets the edge well. He actually was really high up there on the team in terms of pressure last year, 5 sacks in 4 games, including the playoff game. So he came on late in the year, but you're right. There's so much talent. There's so much versatility there that I could see them parting ways with him. And, another player who actually has been getting a lot of love, in my opinion, at least, that I've seen is Brian Cox Jr., a guy that has some experience with Eric Washington from their time in Carolina. But I do want to quickly flip over here to the secondary. Someone said, Ike Brown has now retired. Josh Norman, we're still not really sure about him. Sean McDermott said today something about we'll know more in probably the next 5 days. With those two players, being out, Brown being, on the retired list now, one, how is Cam Lewis looking? How is Dane Jackson looking? But two, do you think maybe now the Bills might actually speed up that process of bringing in some cornerbacks for workouts? Because Norman, at least maybe 5 days until we know where he's at health-wise. And now Brown, another depth guy, is out of the equation.
Brandon Beane yesterday said that they are not currently in any rush to go out and find a cornerback. If you remember, they brought in Akeem King earlier in camp, and they ended up moving on from him pretty quickly. I think that, without getting into where they're playing and how they're playing, or in like where they're lining up, I think that Cam Lewis is somebody that is a wild card even before all these injuries. And we've talked about it. A guy that can probably make this roster based on what he already knows about this scheme and where his fit potentially is in that. And with Saran Neal, he's somebody that he could do so many things. I mean, he played 3 positions last year. I mean, starting in training camp all the way through. So I think that their thought process is, and then another guy that we could talk about, Taron Johnson, who's just absolutely on fire today. Like, I thought every time he was involved in something, he was making a play or somebody was struggling in a battle with him. And so whether it be 1-on-1s or 11-on-11. So they're so strong in their secondary that, a couple injuries here and there, Ike Brown maybe retiring here, could put a damper on their depth, if you will, but they believe in guys to switch things up and play other spots. But the more guys you ask to do that, the less guys you have behind them. So that's, so that's the question. And Brandon Beane said they're open to scheduling workouts so they can at least get a guy into the building, take a look at him, and maybe figure out if we do need to make a move at some point, we have a kind of almost like a rolling Rolodex of guys that we'd be open to bringing in. So I think that it's almost like a wait and see, because Brandon also said, we don't want to take away reps from a lot of these guys that are getting a lot of reps. With Josh Norman goes out, Levi Wallace, just by the sheer numbers, that was his main competition. He's probably going to get more work. So I think from that perspective, they just want to be patient, and they have time to be patient because they don't really need to make a move until we get up against it here when the games are going to start. But the cornerback thing is interesting. It's always interested to me how comfortable they seem when the numbers dwindle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about Lewis being a wild card of sorts, because there's always one or two players that are those wild cards that make it through a roster and kind of fly under the radar in terms of attention. Last year was Ike Butker, or Butker. So this year, it could very well be Lewis, who knows the system entering year two. A little bit of a kicker talk now in the chat. Someone said, do you think you could sneak Hauschka to the practice squad? I'm going to answer that one. No, you cannot. Teams are looking for kickers all the time. And even if he somehow loses this job with the Bills, he would get claimed so quickly that by so many teams would probably put in a claim on him. And then obviously the lowest seed there, the lowest man on the totem pole in terms of record last year would end up getting him. But no, Hauschka is not a guy that you could get on the practice squad. I don't think Bass is a guy you can get on the practice squad. I hate to be that guy, but I'm starting to waver back and forth on whether or not you can keep two kickers. I don't think you can, but it wouldn't shock me if the Bills figured out or made a way to do it. But talk a little bit about what we saw from Stephen Hauschka today.
Hausch Money returned to the building, 5 for 5, and then I believe he hit another one. Might have been like a 30 to 40 yarder at the end of 11 on 11 drill. So I think he was 6 for 6 on the day. Hit his only 50 plus yarder, 54 yarder. That would have been good from maybe maximum 55. It just crept over the bar there. But a huge day for Hauschka on a day where yesterday where Tyler Bass missed his 250 yarders, where that's where he's supposed to be strongest. So I think Hauschka, if you were asking me where things stand, we go back to last week and the 2 misses, or I believe it was 3 misses by Hauschka from 50, really put him, I think, Bass in the driver's seat, where I feel like they've now evened out again. And we almost have a brand new competition starting at the beginning again. And it's going to be a big day Thursday when, Sean McDermott said it's going to be like a game. So I'm wondering, they even to the point where he wants to try to do like a halftime. And so guys like rookies and guys like Stefon Diggs, who are new to playing in the locker room and being on this team, they get a sense of comfort going through, a game day environment. So we'll see how that progresses and see if, somebody can make a significant case for themselves, I believe, on Thursday. Punter note, it was just Corey Bajorquez today, but he had a couple punts where he was just outstanding. Like it's typical Bajorquez coming at you with the absolutely superb few punts and a couple that just kind of leave you like, and there was a couple early on, but then my buddy Joe Biscaglia had his stopwatch out. One of the kicks went over 5 seconds in hang time, and it was picture perfect kick down to the 1 yard line. The gunner got down there, was able to down it at the 1. So it was a big day for Bajorquez coming off of Edwards. I still can't pronounce his first name. You're gonna have to do it for me, Ryan.
Lachlan.
Yeah, I want to call him Lachlan every time. I don't know why. And when I want to say Lachlan, then I mess it up even more in my head. But here's another thing I've also done. After watching him kick the other day on his first day, I almost don't see the point in learning his name because I think that Bajorquez is going to end up winning this job. So, which is disappointing because I saw the replacements meme going out around there, and he is almost like an identical twin to the kicker from the replacements. And if you have not seen that movie, how dare you call yourself a football fan? But so, yeah, Taiwan Jones, I see that in the comments here. We'll give him a little update on him. Josh Norman missed again. Bit on him. Sean McDermott said the next 5 days are going to be really important as he tries to get treatment and maybe get things under control with that hamstring. Taiwan Jones, we did get confirmation it was a knee injury. We'll see how long that he's kept out of practice. And again, Wade with the quad.
Yeah, so a little bit of injury issues here and there, but that seems to be happening across the league. Like you said, a lot of soft tissue issues going on. All things considered, it's kind of like a wait and see, at least for these Bills players. could be a lot worse based on some of the things that we've seen across the league for sure.
For sure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been 30 minutes of the Shout Buffalo Football podcast. I don't know what it is, Ryan. I'm not feeling it today. Like, I think the sun just took it out of me. I hope I wasn't too I hope I didn't lack the usual spunk and energy that we like to bring to the show, but I'm going to go like have a cup of coffee or something, maybe lay down for a little while. I don't know. I feel like such a baby, but thank you so much for joining us. We have really enjoyed bringing you guys these daily camp observation podcasts. They're going to continue. We're going to have one tomorrow, and then we're going to have a big one on Thursday after the scrimmage. Maybe get a real solid look and feeling on what this team looked like, where they're at in this process. That's one of the things we asked Josh about too today, is like, how, I think it was Mookie Hawkins, my man, shout out, Wolfo Sports over there, always asking great questions, keeping everybody entertained on these calls that can be a little bit boring at times, but I feel like Mookie brings the energy always. And he asked him, like, how crisp is the offense right now? And Josh said, listen, we like the way that, our pace has been in practice. Brian Dable, the way that he's installed the offense. So great stuff. As always, from you guys in the comments, shout a Buffalo Football podcast. Search it on all your podcast app platforms. Subscribe, rate, review. We really appreciate it. And we will see you next time. My man, Ryan, have yourself a great Monday.
Hey, you too.